Hey guys, hi, I'm Montel Williams. Look, I'm so looking forward to you joining me along with Doug Barron on his Leadership and Loyalty Stay Curious podcast, because we're talking about all kinds of things. We're going to give you a little bit of history of me as Montel Williams, the talk show host, but I'm also going to keep you up to date on what I've been doing since I stopped the Daily Show. And I'm going to also give you some information about how you can improve your life. I think through some of the things that I've done, some of the ways that I kind of help to work to improve others' lives. So please, come on, be a part of the conversation. Stay curious.
Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with the one, the only, Montel Williams. Now, in part 1 of the show, by the way, if you didn't hear part 1, go back, click listen. It's a fascinating examination of, first of all, who defines who we are, and at what point do you make the decision that you will not be defined by other people's limitations, biases, or even frameworks? That's an important question that Montel was confronted with very early on in his life, and then made a decision about it. You know, by the time he's in 6th grade, is like, no, this is not who he is. Now, that in itself is a fascinating piece of the story. We talked about his military background, and we talked about where he has gone since he's been out of the spotlight. Because in a fame-driven society, we tend to think that people who drop out of the spotlight drop through the cracks. And what we don't realize is there are many people who you or your parents or your grandparents used to watch on TV every day who have gone on to do amazing work, not least of all Montel and what he's done. Gone on to do amazing work, and there's always been a theme at the back of that. So let's jump into that there, Montel. Mm-hmm. You were on the air for years and years and years. And what year was it that you came off the air?
The show started in 1991, and in about 50% of the country, we were still on in 2008, but it officially stopped in 2007.
Okay, so 2007, there is, again, this is my memory. I actually purposely didn't research it. I wanted to see what bias is in my head, because it would have been fed, right? Yeah. So that's why I'm not going to do my research on this. Let's see so my bias was, what I took in was the Montel show was canceled. Montel has been diagnosed with MS, and he'd been working through that. But then it was discovered that he was using marijuana to treat his symptoms, and that's why he's not on the air anymore. Now, again, I am stating this is not researched on purpose, because I wanted to put forward the bias that was given me, or I filtered from everything that was out there. What really happened?
Well, it's really interesting because you were alone. There's a lot of people who kind of filtered the information that way, but I got diagnosed with MS in 2000. So right. I stayed on the air for 7 years. I really came forward the first time and acknowledged my cannabis use in 2002, internationally, and still was on the air for another 5 years.
Right.
It did not actually, it wasn't one of the reasons for me stepping down. As a matter of fact, I stepped down because of some differences with the syndicated that I had been working with at the time. And we had, gotten into some arguments about some things that were going on, and there were some directions that they wanted me to take on the show that I wasn't going to take, period. Mm-hmm. Again, let's go back to the idea, I'll tell you that when I decided to define who I am, I defined who I was even on television. Every single show that we did, I approved every single guest from about the 6th month on, and every single topic that we did. If I didn't approve it, it wasn't done. I left guests in dressing rooms and refused to do the show because that was not what they were supposed to come to talk to me about. So I want to make sure people understand. When I left the show, I had really unbelievable support from CBS and from Paramount, even though I had MS. None of them could really see some of the issues that I was going through, but at the same time, I was going through issues that I was finding extremely difficult for me to deal with. And I was suffering from a myriad of symptoms that in some ways, even doing the show at the time, were exacerbating some of those symptoms.
Sure.
I suffer from something that's called emotional lability, which has now been termed by the pharmaceutical industry so they can make a buck, something called pseudobulbar effect. Well, meaning that I was having some difficulties because of scarring in my brain with my highs and my lows, and how I responded to my highs and my lows. I could slip into depression if I saw a kitten. I could start crying if I walk outside and the wind blew. And I knew that it was time. And you mentioned it earlier. I dealt with a lot of very serious human issues.
Yes.
Not just the big breast or the stripper or this, that, and the other. I was dealing with issues that a lot of other talk shows wouldn't even talk about. I was one of the first to actually sit down with survivors of Columbine and bring them on. I sat down and talked about domestic violence. I talked about hatred and those kinds of things in ways that other people weren't discussing. But I was starting to figure out that instead of being able to go home and let that go, that was becoming a part of me. And I needed to just take a break. You know what I mean? So, and I did so. And fortunately, when I did do so, I was also moving into a couple of other treatment protocols that were experimental, but that were working. Now, my cannabis use, I was very open with. I literally held a press conference. I think it was in 2003, and stated unequivocally. Let me just explain to you. I said, I don't care what you know, what you think you know, but what you need to understand is that our government, yes, the United States government, the same government that claims that cannabis has no medicinal purpose, has lied to the world.
Yes.
For now 20 years, because in 2002, that government filed and gave itself a patent on cannabis and cannabinoids, showing its efficaciousness in a myriad of ways.
Mm-hmm.
They filed and gave themselves a patent on CBD.
Yes.
2002. And if you listen to politicians today, some of these buttheads are still running around saying that it doesn't work. They're lying out of their teeth. They really are. Because the pharmaceutical industry doesn't want something that's a weed that doesn't cost that much money. Look, I'm on Western medication. I'm going to tell you something. I'm a believer, and this is for all your listeners. Cannabis alone will not cure MS. No. Not even saying it even comes close to curing MS. But it's part of what should be in the quiver of every doctor to help deal with and mitigate some of the symptoms. There's no reason why we can't use holistic alternatives to Western money-grubbing companies. I'm sorry. I'm on a Western medication that is about, I think it's $1,600 a month, brother.
Yeah. So what do you do if you're on welfare? What do you do if you're a poor person? Right?
You're not going to get it.
Right. So a system that abuses sick people for profit, to me, is beyond disgusting. When as an example, the new laws in the U.S., insulin was discovered by a Canadian, and the patent was given away so that people could have it for free. It's very cheap to produce, and there are many people sharing their insulin bottles with family members in the United States because they can't afford to buy it.
It's disgusting.
That is outrageous.
Disgusting. It's just like when you said we're going to talk about it during the show, and I hope I'm not going to step into it too quickly. It's like PTSD.
Yep.
No PTSD exists, but this has become a cottage industry. There are people who are making money off the pain of other people, and they want to keep them in pain so they can continue to make money. Disgusting. I'm involved in a protocol. I'm involved in a protocol called RTM, Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories. That protocol, in 5 to 10 hours, has been alleviating all PTSD symptoms in 9 out of 10 people who go through it. I'm not talking about 3 out of 10.
No.
Because, the standard of care for PTSD has been something that's called exposure therapy along with drugs. That's only been proven to be no greater than 37% efficacious anywhere in the world. So that means 3 out of 10.
Yeah.
I'm talking about 9 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. When there's 9 out of 10, this isn't anecdotal. This is anecdotes are when 1. This is 9 out of 10 people are cured. They are alleviated of all their symptoms in 5 to 10 hours without a single pill. And I'm going to tell you that there are gatekeepers in the PTSD industry worldwide, but especially here in the United States, that are so disgusting that they would rather see people suffer so they can continue to get their grant to study bullshit.
Well, here's the bottom line. If I'm a pharmaceutical company and you come up with a cure, I've lost a customer.
Done. And let's take a look at this. The normal price tag for people suffering from PTSD is somewhere around $60,000 to $130,000 a year, depending on where you are. If you're in the military, we spend as much as $120,000 to $130,000 per soldier on PTSD in the course of a year. If you're somebody who's in a civilian job, your insurance might only cover $60,000 worth of therapy. The RTM protocol, when it is finally completely implemented, will probably cost no more than about $1,000 to $2,000.
Right.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
So we got an industry that wants to keep this squashed, that's doing everything they can to keep this squashed. I have been so disgusted in the last, I've been working with this group for about 10 years, but in the last 3 years, we've really been pushing forward, pushing hard, pushing against. And I have been so disgusted by my own government and the way they look at the fact that they keep talking about the fact that every single day we have anywhere from 18 to 22 soldiers, veterans take their own lives. There's 135 civilians that take their own lives every single day.
Mm-hmm.
We could stop this, but they don't give a damn. They want to make sure they keep making their money. They want to make sure they keep getting their grants. There are $1 billion grants over here, $400 million grants over here, $300 million grants over here. Are you kidding me? This protocol is so successful that we've already trained 35, I think it's 37 clinicians in Poland and the Ukraine that are treating people right now. Mm-hmm. This was used for 9/11 survivors. It's been used in New Mexico for first responders. We're looking at a world, Dove, that I don't know if the people who are listening to this are really quite understanding what we're talking about. But in the United States, there's information out there that says anywhere from 40 to 45% of the people who spent more than 2 days in the hospital for COVID are suffering from PTSD.
Yes.
There's somewhere between 35 and 45% of all first responders, nurses, doctors, firemen suffering from PTSD. People say, why was a fireman? Well, because a fireman got called out to go retrieve the body in the house.
Yep.
And had to be worried about whether they were taken home to their kids.
Yep.
And these people aren't being healed. They're not even being helped. And give us about another 2 or 3 years when we recognize that in the medical professional field, we're losing so many professionals who are quitting, getting out, they're aging out. There are not going to be enough medical professionals in the United States or in the world to be able
to give everybody some understanding of that and some context around that. We're dealing with, as you know, if you're in the leadership space, we've been dealing with the Great Resignation since COVID. And I talked about, as you know, on this show and in some of my articles, that COVID was the great pause. We had been running on that treadmill of lack since 2008, and everybody wanted more, get money, protect yourself for if everything goes out of the window. And COVID happened, everybody got panicked and freaked out, and then they realized, why the hell am I doing this? And they got a pause to ask themselves about the meaning of their lives and why they're doing it. But in the process of that, they got this pause to think about meaning and then realized, I can't connect to the people I need to connect to. Human beings need that. Neurologically, biologically, we need to bond with others. We were separated from others. Then we had people who were sick, who we might have lost. There were people we did lose, whose funerals we couldn't go to. I have many friends who lost people during COVID. And by the way, not just with COVID. So they lost people because of heart attacks or cancer or whatever, couldn't go to a funeral. Right. So that community was gone. So you've got, that's why I said it in the introduction, PTSD is epidemic. And I talked about this with many leaders around the world they're saying to me, what do we do to prepare to come back? Do we go hybrid? I'm like, here's what you do. You understand that you're going to be dealing with epidemic levels of PTSD that are not from what you think, that are from the fact that your people couldn't go to a funeral, that they couldn't go visit their mom in the hospital, that they fear that they might lose their child or their partner, as well as all the stuff from isolation. So you've got all those things. Now you've got the Great Resignation. Now you've got what's called quiet quitting, which is people showing up to work and doing the bare minimum because they're not really present. And all of that is going on. And just as an example, Canada, the population of Canada, it's less than the population of California. Guess what? We are 1 million healthcare workers short.
Yeah.
1 million in Canada.
Well, even before COVID, I was speaking around the country, and this is like 4 or 5 years ago. I remember speaking 5 years ago, 6 years ago, speaking at national events for National Nurses Association, for National Doctors Association, for different organizations. And I kept telling them that, what America's not paying attention to is that there are these two freight trains running down the track headed directly at each other. One of those freight trains is something called chronic illness. Mm-hmm. Now starting to see that in the United States and in Canada, I think it's the same. It's close to 60% of the population has close to one chronic illness. 60% has close to one chronic illness, and there's another 30% that have almost two. Mm-hmm. So we have chronic illness coming down the track this way, and we have just the aging out because of what you talked about earlier about we're living in a time where everybody wants to be a star. Everybody wants to be, something other than a doctor or a nurse or a provider, a healthcare provider.
Yep.
There are people going to school in the next 4 or 5 years. And this information was out there 5 years ago that by 2023, America could be somewhere near 500,000 doctors short and about 700,000 nurses short. If we're going to be 700,000 nurses short, when you start talking about doling out health care, that's what's going to start happening in the United States because there isn't anybody there to answer the door. And I don't know how we convince a society that is so focused on now, how can I grub as much as I can? How can I get as much as I can without doing as much as I want? To understand that it's okay to go to school and learn and educate yourself, and it's okay to want to do something for others. We've completely skipped that, especially here in the United States. I mean, I tell you, we're so divided, so angry at each other. We don't give a damn about helping anybody. We don't even open the door. We don't even say thank you if somebody opens the door for you. It's disgusting.
Yeah. So, you talked about the government and the problems with the government and not bringing forward cures that would be certainly cost effective. I want to be clear with people. When we say the government, we are not talking about the Biden administration. We're not talking about the Trump administration. We're talking about the government. This is it's nonpartisan. It's anybody in those, and particularly, I've spoken a lot about this on this show and on other shows. When you look at the amount of money that is in politics, is insane. And so a lot of the policies that go through are going through because somebody is greasing the palms of somebody else. And that, where the lobbyists are, is where the problem is.
If you don't grease the palm, you don't get hurt. If you don't come in some way, shape, or form, wink, wink, I got something for you. After this conversation, forget about it. They're not even going to invite you to the table.
Right. And I saw a wonderful documentary several years ago about somebody who ran for Congress, got in, and said, I'm walking away. After like a few years, I'm walking away. And they said, why? And he said, because day one, I had to meet with donors. The whole thing was about meeting with donors. It wasn't about getting stuff done. And so what we're trying to point out for you as you listen to this is it's a system that's broken. It's a broken system. And when you are suffering with things like, chronic illness, PTSD, MS, whatever it might be, you are going to be the first people to fall through the cracks. And if you don't, as our mutual friend Philip said, he said to me one day, he goes, I think the American healthcare system, he, as you know, is originally a Canadian and he lives in America. And he said, I think the American medical system is fantastic as long as you're wealthy.
Correct.
If you're not wealthy, it's, you're dead in the water. And so that's the challenge, that it's all about the money. So now if you look at, okay, it's about the money. And then on the other side of it, Joe Public is going, well, how do I get the money? Quickest way is I become famous. I become a YouTube star, an Instagram star, whatever it is. Do I have to go get a job? Not really. Do I, because I'm really pretty, or I'll spend what money I've got and get some kind of reconstruction done on some part of my body so that I can use that as leverage. And it's like, wow, we have lost our humanity. And this treatment you're talking about with the RTM is about restoring people to their humanity. So can we talk a little bit about that part of it? Because I think that's vitally important.
Yeah, one of the most significant things about it is that it is a psychological protocol that literally, I'll do it in layman term, but what it does is, instead of forcing the individual to relive the trauma that caused the PTSD, it literally allows the individual to be almost the projectionist in a movie theater.
Yeah, they're observing.
You're an observer, but you're projecting this out for others to observe. And then you look at the other's reaction to what's happened, and you look at it over and over again. And though it won't force you to actually relive the trauma, it makes you at least acknowledge that it happened by, thunder.
It's okay.
By acknowledging that it happened, it also allows you to put it into a different perspective in your own brain, so that we're starting to see, and we think that this protocol actually does physical changes to the amygdala of the brain. Because
just to go to the neuroscience of it for everybody, because, as we've talked about this, we've talked about the neuroscience on the show before. And as you know, we've had neuroscientists on the show, particularly around PTSD. So here's what, for those of you who are not familiar with this, neuroplasticity is something we've become aware of in the last 15 to 20 years, which means for people who are as old as me, we grew up with the idea that the brain you got is the brain you got, and that's all you got. And what we know now for sure is that that's not the case. Your brain is changing all the time, and you can rewire parts of your brain if you do certain things. Now, the way you habitually think has created neural pathways, neurons that fire together, wire together, and that's the easiest path. So that's what we call the land of familiar. It just goes down the path. You see somebody who looks like that, and your brain automatically, trying to save energy, because the organ that uses the most energy is your brain, says, oh, that means that. It doesn't necessarily mean that, but it's a quick way of doing it. But if you have a trigger that's related to a PTSD, to a trauma, it says, oh, well, the lights flashed, and that reminds me of being at night out in a battlefield, and the weapons, the missiles coming out overhead, and now there's this flashing light. okay, that must be what it is, and it's not. Your brain's responding that way. By going in and knowing how to go in and refire that separately, the neurons that fired together are now changed to fire in a different direction, and your brain literally changes. And now here's the key: when it changes, so every thought you have, and particularly every feeling you have, is a neurochemical cocktail. That's all it is. It's produced by the different parts of your brain, but particularly by the hypothalamus, the mood and appetite center, produces this chemical cocktail. So it says flashing lights, fear, and it produces adrenals and cortisol and a bunch of other ones that flood your system. The receptors on the cells take that up, and your body goes into a response as if you're in that situation. If those neurons don't fire together, new neurons fire together, then those new neurons wire together, which means it's just a flashing light. The amygdala, the hypothalamus don't respond in the same way. The neurochemicals are not released into your system. Your brain is changed, but here's what's more important, or likely not, at least equally important, is the receptors on the cells start to die off. When they start to die off, that neurochemical cocktail of all the things in PTSD are not taken into the cell. That means that the epigenetic environment that your DNA is sitting in is responding differently. So you can get very serious physical illness from the PTSD because the DNA in your body is responding to the neurochemical cocktail. Take that away and suddenly your DNA is responding differently. You're healthier. So this is why this work is so important. And guess what? This is what Montel's talking about. It's important for you to recognize none of that is because you took a pharmacological substance.
Correct.
It's you rewiring your coconut.
There it is. There it is. And if you want to deal with, I know we're going to run out of time quick, but let's just talk a little bit about the fact of why cannabis seems to work for things like this also. Why? Because for those who are listening, you don't understand. You were born on this planet with something called an endocannabinoid system. You have a system of a nervous, let's call it, for lack of a better term, a secondary sympathetic nervous system made up of these receptors that are called endocannabinoid receptors. If you had never consumed any plant-based cannabis in your entire life, I can test your blood and find cannabinoids in you. They may not be the exact same cannabinoids that are in the plant, but there are cannabinoids. They're called anandamide and 2-AG. Those two chemicals themselves are two of the only chemicals in your body that work retroactively. They go backwards in your nervous system to shut down things in the brain. We have stopped feeding that system for about the last 100 years when America decided to outlaw hemp and cannabis for its racist motivation. When we start to understand how much as a mammal, and all mammals on the planet have an endocannabinoid system, how important it is for us to antagonize that system with plant-based cannabinoids. When we start to understand that, we recognize that this endocannabinoid system is what actually puts our cells in our bodies in what we'll call the Goldilocks zone, homeostasis. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. Mm-hmm. And that just right is how we fight off disease and illness. But when we're not using it, and we haven't been using it for the last 100 years, take a look back in the last 100 years, and you can see the proliferation of all forms of diseases that have happened since we shut down the use of cannabis. You go back to the late 1600s, early 1700s, almost every sailor in the world that went on a ship ate a porridge with hemp seeds.
Yes.
And after that hemp seed, they actually grew the plant. You were allowed to have the plant, your ration of rope, when you were out at sea. Why did they do that? Because they recognized that by eating that plant, it helped to keep them a little healthier than the other guys who didn't eat the plant.
Right.
We got to get back to that. And
well, you and I talked about the patriotism of growing hemp. Just share that with people, because I think it's really a new perspective for people.
The founding fathers in the United States of America back, before 1775. If you didn't grow hemp, you were considered not patriotic. Why? Because hemp was used for all of our sails, all of our rope, all of our clothing. The entire Revolutionary Army was clothed in hemp fiber. All the masons that worked with George Washington sat inside of tents made out of hemp. That thing that they were swinging around inside of the mason tent that they claimed was incense, bullshit. It was hemp because they knew that.
Yes.
And let's also think back on time. In the late 1700s, man, you didn't have toilet paper and rolls. You were going out in the woods picking up a leaf and oh my, okay?
Yeah.
Well, there was no air conditioning. There were no heats. We were sleeping on the ground.
Yeah.
It was a very, very hardy time for living. And so, yeah, people consumed THC-laden hemp as part of their natural diet. Most people don't even know that in the United States of America, we drank near beer until the early 1900s. Babies drank near beer. Why? You had to put alcohol in the water to kill off the bacteria.
Yes.
So everybody was walking around in this country and
Drunk.
around the world with a little buzz going on. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's so silly.
So it's fascinating, and you and I could certainly go on for a lot longer. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I just want to let everybody know. Of course, this is part 1 and part 2 of this delicious conversation. Montel and I have been talking about another conversation we're going to have coming back on the show, but with a third person. We're not going to tell you too much about that, but it will take you back to the days of Montel and really the importance of where we actually started, which is you are defined either by yourself or by your environment, and you have to make a decision. And that change, real change, significant change, is not only possible, but it's happening every single day. And we're going to come back on with a third person at a later date. We're going to have a conversation that with somebody who might have been seen as a direct enemy of Dove and a direct enemy of Montel, who is now a very good personal friend of mine, who Montel knows. So that's an extraordinary conversation that's coming up a little bit later. So watch out for that.
And Dove,
Montel,
I'd love to have you on my podcast, Free Thinking, so we can chop it up some more.
Absolutely. I look forward to that. Montel, it's been a pleasure and an honor, sir. Thank you so much.
Well,
Thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy lad. You got a lot going on. So we really appreciate you being here with us.
Let me leave you with one little final thought. This is for all of your listeners. That whole idea of defining yourself means that you have to know who you are.
Yes.
This whole thought process that people have about, if you talk to yourself, well, you're crazy. No, you're not. If there's one person on this planet that you should spend more time talking to, it's you.
Yes.
Take a little time every single day and look back in your life at things that have happened and see if you can remember your response to those things that happened. And then go ahead, don't judge yourself. Just review your response. You may find out that, did I really have to yell at that person that time? Did I really have to get that mad that time? Maybe I could have done this and it would have been different. If you start doing that, that's self-evaluation with meaning. And it'll help you think about how you respond in the future to things that happen.
I think it's really important. Thank you for sharing that. As I would put it to you as you listen to this, you are either refined or defined by what happens to you. If you're defined by it, then you're in reaction. If you're refined by it, you let it, as Montel just pointed out, you let yourself see how you behaved in a way that you might not feel so great or proud of, even if they, whoever they are, the people around you, cheered you on, and you get to make the decision, this is not who I am. This is not how I want to leave the planet. This is not my imprint that I want to leave. So again, Montel, it's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. Thank you so very much. Delicious conversation. And as I said, we'll make sure that we post all the links to where you can find Montel on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on his own website. We'll find all those. We'll make sure they're in the notes. You can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Remember, those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of the tribe. Whether it's business or political leadership, if you're committed to positively shaping those landscapes, you've got to tap into what drives human behavior. And you can tap into this groundbreaking understanding and how to apply the anatomy of meaning extracted from the emotional source code to transform everything in your life, including your business and your leadership. I'm Dov Baron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Again, we love it when you rate, review, and subscribe to the show. It's really important to us. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about who's defining and determining who you are, about the biases you've bought that you were sold by mass media that may have nothing to do with the truth, and what will be the difference you'll make if you're not famous. You don't need to be famous to make a difference. What if the difference you can make is that you transform somebody's life because you were there at a hospital bed, or you were there in a store, or you smiled? There's a difference you can make every single day. The only way to do that is to stay curious, my friends. Stay curious with yourself and with others. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.